Welcome to this journey of one of the most disturbing cases in recorded history of Harper's Ridge, West Virginia. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a comment about where you're watching from and the exact time you heard this story. We're interested in knowing where and at what times of day or night these documented accounts arrive. The documents were found in 1963 during renovation work at the old county courthouse in Beckley, West Virginia. A wooden box containing several leather-bound journals, newspaper clippings, and official correspondence dated between 1895 and 1897 was discovered sealed behind a wall in the basement archives. The collection was briefly examined by local historian Dr. Samuel Whitaker before being transferred to state archives for preservation. Mysteriously, the collection disappeared during transport, with only Dr. Whitaker's initial notes and selected photocopies remaining as evidence of their existence. What follows is a narrative constructed from these fragmentary documents. The wooden box itself was unusual, according to Dr. Whitaker's notes. Constructed of oak, it bore no maker's mark or identification, yet featured an elaborate locking mechanism requiring 3 separate keys. The interior was lined with lead sheeting approximately 1/4 inch thick, an expensive and unusual precaution typically reserved for items requiring protection from moisture or other environmental factors. Most peculiar were the symbols etched into the inner lid, a series of concentric circles and radial lines forming a pattern similar to mining survey notations but corresponding to no standard system in use during that period. When questioned about these markings, the courthouse curator reportedly suggested they might be binding symbols, meant to contain whatever was stored within, a superstitious but telling observation. Harper's Ridge sits nestled between the rolling Appalachian foothills of Raleigh County, West Virginia, a place where coal and timber once promised prosperity, but delivered something else entirely. In the winter of 1895, this small mining settlement became the focal point of a series of events so disturbing that county officials reportedly sealed all related documents, burying the truth beneath layers of bureaucratic silence. The region's geological formation consists primarily of sedimentary rock dating to the Carboniferous period, approximately 300 million years ago, when vast swamps and forests covered the area. These ancient organic materials compressed over eons to form the rich coal seams that attracted industrial development in the late 19th century. What geological surveys failed to note, however, were the unusual formations deep beneath these coal deposits, formations inconsistent with known evolutionary processes and natural cave systems. The mining operation at Harper's Ridge was established in 1887 by the Western Coal and Timber Company. By 1895, the Harper's Ridge mine had expanded significantly, tunneling deep beneath the surrounding ridge lines. Company ledgers indicate production increased threefold between 1890 and 1895, with over 200 men employed at the site. These were boom times for the region, though prosperity often came at a terrible price. Initial surveys conducted by company geologist Hamilton Fredericks in 1886 noted several peculiarities about the ridge's formation. His report, partially preserved in Whitaker's collection, contains this observation. The eastern face presents unusual stratification patterns inconsistent with regional geology. Of particular note are the vertical shafts discovered during preliminary drilling, perfectly cylindrical passages approximately 7 inches in diameter, extending to depths beyond our current equipment's capacity to measure. These appear to predate the surrounding rock formation, which geological evidence suggests is impossible. I have requested specialized equipment to further investigate these anomalies before full-scale mining operations commence. No record exists of this requested investigation ever taking place. Fredericks' name disappears from company records shortly after submitting this report, with subsequent geological assessments conducted by less credentialed individuals who raised no further concerns about the site's unusual characteristics. From the Journal of Dr. Jeremiah Huxley, county physician, dated January 12, 1895, Another case of the peculiar wasting illness has presented itself. Mr. Nathaniel Reed, age 42, miner at Harper's Ridge, exhibits the same symptoms as the previous cases: profound weakness, pallor of an unusual gray quality, and, most curiously, an inability to recall specific memories from recent weeks. His wife claims he returned home after a 3-day absence, though Reed himself insists he never left. Most concerning are the small puncture marks along his forearms and neck, which he cannot explain. This marks the 7th such case in as many weeks. In a personal letter to a former colleague at Johns Hopkins University dated January 15, 1895, Dr. Huxley elaborates on his growing concerns. The medical establishment would dismiss these cases as simple mining accidents or perhaps mass hysteria, but I assure you, Willard, something far more troubling is occurring in this remote corner of Appalachia. The puncture wounds I previously described appear to be entry points for what I can only describe as subcutaneous tunneling, minute passages beneath the skin that extend throughout the body in patterns suggesting deliberate design rather than random injury or infection. Most disturbing is the consistent cognitive deterioration observed across all affected individuals. The pattern begins with specific memory lapses, patients unable to recall certain days or experiences, before progressing to more profound personality alterations. In advanced stages, the affected display a peculiar detachment from their own identity while simultaneously developing an obsessive fixation on returning to the deeper sections of the mine. When prevented from doing so, they become increasingly agitated, often claiming to hear tapping or calling sounds that no one else perceives. The winter of 1895 was particularly harsh in the Appalachian region. Historical weather records indicate temperatures remained below freezing from December through late February, with several major snowstorms isolating remote settlements for weeks at a time. It was during one such storm that Harrington Caldwell, superintendent of the Harper's Ridge mine, documented the first official incident. From the company records of Western Coal and Timber, February 3, 1895, operations suspended today following discovery of abandoned equipment in the Northeast Tunnel, Section 7. Tools belonging to the night shift crew were found arranged in a peculiar circular pattern approximately 600 feet from the main shaft. No workers were present despite scheduled operations, investigation pending weather improvement, security to be doubled effective immediately. Meteorological records from Beckley indicate the storm that isolated Harper's Ridge between February 1 or 7, 1895, was exceptional even by regional standards, dropping over 32 inches of snow with sustained winds exceeding 40 miles per hour. This isolation may explain the delay in official response to the increasingly disturbing occurrences at the mining settlement, but it cannot account for the systematic suppression of information that followed when communications were restored. A subsequent notation dated February 5th adds further concern. Night watchman Silas Murdoch reports unusual sounds emanating from sealed Section 8. Describes it as rhythmic scraping, like metal against stone, but with an irregular pattern. Investigation team assembled but unable to proceed due to continuing blizzard conditions. Murdoch has requested reassignment to surface duties. The personnel file for Silas Murdoch, preserved in Whitaker's collection, contains a curious medical notation dated February 8, 1895. Subject exhibits extreme agitation and insomnia following night duty at northeast shaft entrance. Claims to have observed movement within solid rock face during final watch. Prescribed laudanum for nerves and reassigned to company store as requested. Note: subject's timepiece reportedly stopped at precisely 2:17 a.m. during final watch, a detail he seems fixated upon, though its relevance is unclear. The company archives contain an undated fragment, believed to be from mid-February. Spooky third such arrangement discovered, tools placed in concentric circles, measuring exactly 7 feet in diameter. Engineer Donovan suggests possible connection to folk rituals among immigrant miners. have instructed foremen to identify and discipline responsible parties, cannot afford superstitious disruptions to operations. A private journal believed to belong to Martin Donovan, chief engineer, contains a more candid assessment. The circular arrangements continue to appear despite increased security. What troubles me is not merely their unauthorized creation, but their mathematical precision. Each circle measures exactly 7 feet in diameter, with tools placed at intervals of exactly 4.25 inches, creating patterns reminiscent of the mining notation system I developed last autumn. Yet these patterns incorporate symbols I never included in my system. More concerning still is their location, always in sections of the mine where the strange vertical shafts noted in Fredericks's initial survey have been breached during excavation. The town of Beckley, some 20 miles south of Harper's Ridge, maintained the region's only newspaper at that time. The Beckley Mountain Herald, a weekly publication, made no mention of disturbances at Harper's Ridge until late February, when a small notice appeared regarding operational difficulties at the mine. The deliberately vague language suggests an attempt to minimize public concern. On February 27th, the newspaper printed a more detailed account. Western Coal and Timber representatives confirm a temporary reduction in workforce at the Harper's Ridge operation, following what company spokesman Wallace Harding described as minor structural concerns requiring standard maintenance. Local residents report several families have departed the settlement in recent weeks, though company officials insist this represents normal workforce fluctuation rather than any cause for alarm. An unpublished draft of this article, discovered among the personal effects of editor Franklin Pierce, reveals significant differences from the printed version. Sources within the Western Coal and Timber Company, speaking on condition of anonymity, describe a situation far more serious than publicly acknowledged. Multiple miners have reportedly disappeared while working in the deepest sections of the Harper's Ridge operation, with several others exhibiting unusual psychological symptoms after returning from these areas. Company physicians have allegedly quarantined at least 9 individuals displaying signs of an unknown wasting illness characterized by memory loss and physical deterioration. Most alarming are reports of unusual phenomena within the mine itself, tools and equipment found arranged in ritualistic patterns, unexplained sounds emanating from supposedly abandoned tunnels, and multiple accounts of movement within solid rock faces. Company officials have implemented extraordinary security measures, including armed guards at all mine entrances and a strict prohibition on communication between miners and outsiders. A handwritten note attached to this draft reads simply, "Unpublishable." Company representatives visited today with significant advertising budget and concerns about community stability. Will run modified version focusing on economic aspects only. FP. According to census records from 1890, Harper's Ridge had a population of approximately 340 residents, primarily miners and their families. By the spring of 1896, that number had dropped to fewer than 100. Company records fail to account for this dramatic population decline, listing only 17 formal resignations during this period and no major accidents or casualties. Parish records from St. Matthew's Church, which served the Harper's Ridge community, provide a more disturbing perspective. Reverend Thaddeus McIntyre maintained a private registry of his congregation separate from official church documentation. This personal record, discovered in 1954 during church renovation, contains this entry from March 1895. Have conducted burial services for Abram Willoughby, though with no body to enter. Like the others before him, Abram simply failed to return from the depths. His belongings remain untouched in his quarters, as if he intended to return at any moment. The company insists he has simply relocated without notice, yet his Sunday wages remain uncollected, and his Bible still sits on his nightstand, open to the book of Job. I fear for this community's soul. 23 of my congregation have vanished since Christmastide, yet company representatives forbid any public acknowledgement of these disappearances. Those who speak openly of their concerns find themselves summarily dismissed from employment. More troubling still are those who return from the deep tunnels changed in ways that transcend physical appearance. They attend services with hollow eyes, mouthing prayers without conviction or comprehension. They respond to scripture readings about the depths of the earth with unseemly interest, while passages of salvation elicit no response whatsoever. Local folklore researcher Montgomery Pierce documented several oral histories from the region in his 1952 collection Appalachian Whispers. One account from an elderly woman identified only as Mrs. G described how residents of Harper's Ridge began to notice strange behaviors among returned miners. They'd come back changed, eyes hollow, speech slow, wouldn't talk about their time down below. Some wouldn't recognize their own kin. Others would stand for hours staring at the ridge like they was listening for something calling them back. And the sounds, Lord, the sounds that came from those tunnels at night, like nothing human ought to make. Another account from Pierce's collection comes from a former company clerk, Ephraim Hollister. The first ones just went missing. No trace. The company said they'd left, abandoned their positions, but their belongings remained in the boarding houses. Then came the ones who returned, altered, moving stiff, like their joints weren't working right, speaking with long pauses between words as if they were listening to something else while talking to you. But worst were their eyes, flat, empty, like looking into still water at midnight. And always that gray pallor to their skin, like the color had been leached out from inside. Hollister's account continues with a disturbing observation. They started showing up for work with these strange markings on their skin, raised ridges forming patterns like I'd seen on some of the old geological maps, but more complex, more deliberate somehow. When asked about these markings, they'd just smile in this empty way and say they were improvements or sometimes mapping. By April, nearly a third of the workforce displayed these markings to some degree. The company doctor examined several affected miners and apparently sent detailed reports to the main office in Pittsburgh. Whatever those reports contained must have alarmed the executives considerably because, within days, armed security personnel arrived at the site. These weren't ordinary guards, but former Pinkerton men with military experience. They established a perimeter around the mine entrances and began restricting movement in and out of the settlement. The winter gradually yielded to spring, but the troubling occurrences at Harper's Ridge only intensified. Between March and April of 1895, no fewer than 23 miners were reported missing. Most disappeared while working in the deepest sections of the mine, though several vanished from their homes, leaving behind all personal belongings. Local postal records provide an indirect measure of the growing crisis. In January 1895, the Harper's Ridge mail station processed approximately 200 outgoing letters per week. By early March, this number had increased to over 500 weekly, suggesting residents were attempting to communicate concerns to friends and family elsewhere, or perhaps seeking employment opportunities that would allow them to leave the settlement. By late March, outgoing mail had dropped dramatically to fewer than 50 items weekly, coinciding with company implementation of what internal documents referred to as communication protocols, a euphemism for systematic mail interception. From the correspondence of Sheriff James Thornton to the Governor's Office, dated April 17, 1895. I respectfully request additional deputies be assigned to Raleigh County immediately. The situation at Harper's Ridge has deteriorated beyond my department's capacity to maintain order. Last night, a group of miners attempted to seal one of the subsidiary tunnels, claiming they heard voices emanating from beyond the reinforced section. Violence broke out when management intervened. 4 men were seriously injured. Tensions remain high, with many residents preparing to abandon the settlement entirely. Sheriff Thornton's personal diary, discovered after his death in 1901, contains more candid observations about the situation. Visited Harper's Ridge again today. The atmosphere has changed dramatically since my last inspection in February. Armed guards at all approaches to the settlement. Company officials evasive about missing persons reports filed by family members. Most disturbing was my interview with Jacob Mercer, whose brother Isaiah disappeared 3 weeks ago. Jacob showed me strange markings on his own forearms, raised ridges forming patterns he claims appeared after he searched the lower tunnels for his brother. He spoke in disjointed sentences, as if struggling to maintain his train of thought, and repeatedly referred to the old miner beneath who remembers the ways of stone. Isaiah Mercer's quarters contained a peculiar journal filled with increasingly incoherent entries. The final pages consist entirely of diagrams, concentric circles intersected by radial lines forming patterns similar to those I observed on Jacob's skin. The oldest miner still works the deepest seam. A telegram from Harrington Caldwell to company headquarters, dated April 22, 1895, suggests increasing desperation. Urgent stop require, immediate security personnel, stop miners refusing deep tunnel work, stop claims of unusual phenomena persist, stop recommend. Temporary cessation of operations in sections 7 through 10, stop, await instructions, stop. The company's response, delivered by courier the following day, was unequivocal. Production. Quotas remain unchanged. The final entry, dated simply Deep Day, reads, "It moves through stone as we move through air. It remembers what it takes. It keeps what it needs. Security personnel en route. Employ strikebreakers if necessary. Any worker refusing assigned duties to be terminated immediately with forfeiture of outstanding wages. Investigate source of disruptive rumors and discipline accordingly. Report daily." This harsh response may be better understood in light of financial records from this period, which indicate Western Coal and Timber had recently secured a major government contract contingent upon maintaining specific production levels. Company correspondence reveals executives were aware of the unusual occurrences at Harper's Ridge, but prioritized fulfilling this contract over addressing worker safety concerns. From an internal memo dated April 25, 1895, while the reported phenomena at Harper's Ridge warrant investigation, current production must be maintained to satisfy the Baltimore and Ohio Railway contract. Failure to meet delivery schedules would result in financial penalties exceeding $50,000 and jeopardize future government opportunities. Security measures should focus on containing both the situation and information regarding same. Recommend isolating affected individuals and controlling communication with outside entities until contract obligations are fulfilled. Dr. Huxley's journal entries from this period become increasingly disturbed, documenting a growing number of patients suffering from unexplained medical conditions. His April 28th entry reads, "I can no longer attribute these symptoms to coal dust exposure or malnutrition. The consistent presentation across diverse patients defies conventional diagnosis. Most disturbing is the marked personality alteration observed in advanced cases, a profound detachment, loss of emotional affect, and fixation on returning to the deep places, as many have taken to calling the lower mind sections. I have written to colleagues at Johns Hopkins regarding the possibility of some unknown pathogen or perhaps psychological contagion affecting the population." A response to this inquiry, dated May 3rd and signed by Dr. William Osler, suggests Huxley's concerns reached prominent medical authorities. "Your description of symptoms presents a most unusual syndrome with no clear parallel in current medical literature. The subcutaneous tunneling you describe would typically suggest parasitic infestation, yet the absence of inflammatory response and the precise patterning you note contradict this explanation. Similarly, the cognitive and personality alterations would suggest a neurological pathogen, yet the specificity of memory loss and behavioral changes points to a more selective process than any known disease mechanism. Most intriguing is your observation regarding the gray powder substance found within these subcutaneous tunnels. If convenient, please forward samples for laboratory analysis. Until more definitive information becomes available, I suggest isolation protocols for all affected individuals and extreme caution when examining affected tissues. Whatever this condition represents, it appears unlike anything previously documented in medical science. On May 1st, Huxley adds, conducted examination of Wilfred Garrison today, the third miner this week presenting with subcutaneous anomalies. Like the others, Garrison exhibits numerous small tunnels beneath the skin, primarily concentrated along the spinal column and base of the skull. The tunnels appear to have been created from within rather than externally. Most disturbing was Garrison's complete lack of pain response when I probed these areas. He merely stared through me with those characteristic flat eyes and said, "It's making improvements." When asked to elaborate, he lapsed into unresponsive silence. His wife reports he disappeared for 4 days last week and returned with no memory of his absence. In a separate clinical notation, Huxley documents an unusual experiment. Having observed the consistent orientation response in affected patients when exposed to certain stimuli, I conducted a simple test with subjects Garrison, Pembroke, and Sullivan. When a tuning fork was struck and pressed against stone, all 3 subjects turned immediately toward the sound source, regardless of their position in the room or previous activity. More telling, when the same fork was applied to different materials, wood, glass, metal, no response was elicited. Only stone, particularly samples taken from the deeper mine sections, produced this orientation effect. When questioned about this response, Subject Sullivan provided the only coherent explanation. It speaks through stone. The vibrations are its voice. The oldest miner has always spoken thus, long before men came to these mountains. Further questioning yielded only repetition of this statement with minor variations. The discovery of 3 miners on May 2, 1895, marked a turning point in the unfolding horror at Harper's Ridge. According to Sheriff Thornton's report, the men were found wandering along the ridgeline above the mine, disoriented and severely dehydrated. They had been missing for 11 days. Zachary Montgomery, Wesley Blackburn, and Josiah Price were immediately taken to Dr. Huxley's clinic in Beckley. The sheriff's report contains this observation. All 3 men were discovered approximately 2.7 miles northeast of the main mine entrance in an area with no established trails or roads. They walked in a synchronous manner, maintaining exactly 7 feet of separation between them at all times. When approached, they made no acknowledgement of rescuers, but continued walking in a precise circular pattern approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each man carried a single mining tool, Montgomery a pick, Blackburn a shovel, and Price a measuring rod. None appeared to recognize their names when addressed. Dr. Huxley's examination notes contain disturbing details. All 3 men exhibit extensive tunneling wounds beneath the skin, primarily concentrated on the back, neck, and scalp. The wounds appear to have been created from within, rather than being injuries inflicted externally. Subject Montgomery is missing significant tissue from his lower back, yet shows no awareness of this fact. Subject Blackburn repeatedly mumbles about the old one beneath who uses what it needs. Subject Price remains catatonic, responding only when the word ridge is spoken, at which point he becomes severely agitated. A supplementary note in Dr. Huxley's journal, dated May 4th, provides additional context. Nurse Pemberton discovered peculiar markings on the inner forearms of all 3 subjects, identical patterns that resemble mining notations, but correspond to no standard system currently in use. The symbols appear to have been carved into the flesh, then allowed to heal, suggesting they were created some time ago. When I inquired about these markings, Blackburn became briefly lucid and stated, "It marks what it claims. It marks where it's been. It remembers through marking." He then resumed his previous state of semi-consciousness. Huxley's detailed measurements of these markings, preserved in his clinical notes, reveal a disturbing mathematical precision. The primary pattern consists of 7 concentric circles intersected by radial lines at intervals of precisely 15.7 degrees. Secondary patterns branch from specific intersection points, creating what resembles a tunnel mapping system of extraordinary complexity. Most remarkable is the identical nature of these patterns across all three subjects, not merely similar but exact duplicates down to the millimeter, an impossibility if created by human hands without mechanical assistance. None of the men provided coherent accounts of their experiences underground. Montgomery died 3 days after his discovery from what Dr. Huxley described as catastrophic internal hemorrhaging caused by extensive subcutaneous tunneling by an unidentified organism. The autopsy report, partially preserved in Whitaker's notes, indicates something had systematically hollowed out portions of Montgomery's internal organs and muscular tissue, creating an intricate network of small tunnels throughout his body. From Dr. Huxley's autopsy notes, the tunneling extends throughout the thoracic cavity, with particularly extensive networks surrounding the heart and lungs. Most disturbing is the precision of these passages. They navigate between vital structures with unnerving accuracy, as if deliberately preserving certain functions while harvesting others. The tissue at the tunnel margins shows no sign of inflammation or immune response, suggesting the body recognized whatever created these passages as self rather than foreign. Most perplexing is the material found within several of the larger tunnels, a fine gray powder with properties unlike any organic substance I have previously encountered. Under microscopic examination, this powder appears to consist of minute crystalline structures interspersed with what seem to be desiccated cellular components. I have preserved samples for further analysis, though I confess some reluctance to handle the substance extensively. A laboratory analysis conducted by Dr. Thaddeus Wingate at Johns Hopkins, dated May 29, 1895, provides additional insights into this mysterious substance. The samples provided defy conventional categorization. The crystalline structures exhibit properties consistent with certain mineral formations, particularly quartz and feldspar, yet their molecular arrangement follows patterns more typical of organic compounds. Most unusual is their apparent capacity to integrate with biological tissue. Microscopic examination reveals crystalline structures bonded directly to cellular material in a manner suggesting symbiosis rather than parasitism. Chemical analysis yields equally perplexing results. The substance contains elements common to human tissue, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, yet in configurations inconsistent with known biological compounds. Additional elements include traces of rare earth metals, typically found only in deep geological formations. Most remarkably, when maintained at body temperature, the samples exhibit subtle but measurable electromagnetic properties, generating weak electrical fields that fluctuate in regular patterns. In my 40 years of medical research, I have encountered nothing comparable to this substance. Whatever its origin, it represents something entirely outside our current scientific understanding, neither fully mineral nor fully organic, but rather something that appears to bridge these traditionally distinct categories. The Western Coal and Timber Company attempted to maintain normal operations despite the growing crisis. Company records show that on May 15, 1895, management sent a specialized team of engineers to inspect the deepest tunnels where most disappearances had occurred. The team consisted of 7 men, including the company's chief engineer, Augustus Ward. Only Ward returned to the surface. The expedition was extensively documented in company records, with unusually detailed preparations suggesting management anticipated significant hazards. Equipment requisitions included specialized breathing apparatus, recently developed electric lighting systems, and communication equipment using a novel wire and signal system designed to maintain contact with the surface team. Most telling was the inclusion of multiple firearms, an extraordinary precaution for what was officially described as a structural assessment expedition. From the transcript of Augustus Ward's statement taken by Sheriff Thornton on May 16, 1895, we reached the northeastern tunnel complex approximately 1,200 feet below the surface. The support beams showed unusual wear patterns, not typical structural stress, but rather something resembling bore marks, as if the very wood had been partially consumed. Jenkins noted a peculiar rhythmic sound emanating from beyond the reinforced section, a sound like stone being methodically scraped against stone. Ward's statement continues, "Approximately 800 feet into the new excavation, we discovered a narrow fissure in the eastern wall. According to our maps, this area should have been solid bedrock, yet the fissure appeared to lead to a previously unknown natural cavity within the ridge." Peterson suggested the mining operation had inadvertently breached some ancient geological formation. The air flowing from this opening carried an unusual odor, something acrid yet organic. Wilcox and Hargrove volunteered to investigate the fissure, while the rest of us continued our inspection of the main tunnel. We agreed to reconvene in 1 hour. When they failed to return, Jenkins, Murray, Reynolds, and myself entered the fissure to search for them. The natural cavity extended far beyond our expectations, opening into what appeared to be an extensive system of pre-existing tunnels that showed signs of deliberate construction rather than natural formation. A notation in the sheriff's transcript indicates Ward became increasingly agitated at this point, requiring a brief recess before continuing his statement. The tunnels, they weren't carved with tools. The walls had this strange, almost polished quality, as if they'd been worn smooth through continuous contact. Jenkins suggested some ancient underground river might have created the passages, but there was no evidence of water erosion. And the patterns, the way the tunnels branched and reconnected, it wasn't natural, it was purposeful. The deeper we progressed, the more elaborate the tunnel system became. Side passages branched at regular intervals, always maintaining the same 7-foot diameter. The floor contained unusual indentations at precise intervals, circular depressions approximately 3 inches in diameter, arranged in patterns similar to the concentric circles we'd observed in the miners' skin markings. Jenkins made a discovery that particularly disturbed him, a section of wall that appeared to preserve fossilized impressions of some unknown organism. The impressions suggested a creature approximately 7 feet in length, with numerous appendages, and what appeared to be specialized boring structures. Jenkins, who had some paleontological training, insisted no known fossil record contained anything resembling these impressions. He was still documenting these findings when we heard the first screams. Ward's account becomes increasingly fragmented at this point, with Sheriff Thornton noting the engineer's deteriorating mental state during the interview. The most coherent portion of his remaining testimony describes discovering tools and equipment from previously missing miners, arranged in ritualistic patterns throughout the tunnel system. The deeper passages contained evidence of habitation, not recent, but extending back decades, perhaps centuries. We found crude shelters carved into the stone walls and remains of ancient campfires. And the markings, everywhere we looked, the same symbols had been meticulously etched into the rock face. Jenkins suggested they resembled primitive mining notations, but no mining notation I've ever encountered looks like that. We found Murray approximately 2 miles into the tunnel system. He was still alive, technically speaking. His eyes were open, tracking our movements, but he couldn't speak. His jaw moved, but no sound emerged, and his skin, there were these raised ridges beneath the surface, moving, shifting, as if something was crawling just beneath. Jenkins tried to help him stand, but when he touched Murray's arm, the skin, it split open, and this gray powder poured out. Not blood, powder, like pulverized stone. At this point, Ward reportedly began scratching compulsively at his own arms while continuing his statement. That's when we heard it. Not the scraping sound from before, but something else. A sound like metal striking stone, but with a rhythm, almost like a pattern, a language. And it was coming closer. Jenkins panicked, started running back toward the main shaft. Reynolds followed him. I tried to as well, but I couldn't move. Something about that sound. It was familiar somehow, as if I'd heard it before, long ago, in some forgotten dream. The last thing I remember clearly is seeing a figure emerge from the deeper tunnel, tall, thin, moving with a strange, fluid grace. I couldn't make out features in the darkness, just this silhouette against the deeper black. And then it seemed to flow into the wall itself, disappearing into solid stone. After that, just fragments, running, darkness. The sensation of something moving beneath my skin. I don't know how I found my way back to the surface. I don't remember. Ward's final documented statement before his apparent psychological collapse. It moves through the stone as a man moves through air. It has been mining something far more valuable than coal. And now it knows how to reach the surface. An addendum to the sheriff's report, not included in the official transcript but discovered among Thornton's personal papers, contains this observation. Ward's physical condition contradicts his claim of having escaped the tunnel system unharmed. His clothing shows evidence of prolonged contact with the gray powder substance found in previous cases, and medical examination revealed early stages of the subcutaneous tunneling observed in other affected individuals. Most concerning is the perfect circle of precise puncture wounds discovered at the base of his skull, wounds that Ward himself seems unaware of despite their recent infliction. Dr. Huxley has expressed concern that Ward's account may not represent a successful escape, but rather a deliberate release, that whatever entity inhabits those tunnels may have allowed Ward to return specifically to deliver its message to the surface world. The implications of such calculated behavior from what we have previously considered a mindless, predatory phenomenon are too disturbing to include in official documentation. Augustus Ward was committed to Beckley Sanitarium on May 18, 1895. According to sanitarium records, he died 3 weeks later after repeatedly tearing at his own skin, claiming he could feel tunnels being dug beneath the surface. The attending physician's final notes on Ward read, "Patient expired at 3:17 a.m., following self-inflicted lacerations to throat and chest." Most disturbing was the patient's final coherent statement, made approximately 1 hour before death. He suddenly became calm, ceased his frantic scratching, and stated with unnerving clarity, "It's complete now. The mapping is complete. It knows the way through me." He then lapsed into unconsciousness, from which he never recovered. Autopsy requested to determine extent of subcutaneous anomalies reported by nursing staff. No record of this autopsy has been found. The significance of the time 3:17 a.m. recurs throughout the Harper's Ridge documentation. Multiple witnesses reported strange phenomena occurring specifically at this time, and several affected miners were discovered precisely at 3:17 a.m., according to company security logs. The number 317 appears repeatedly in the concentric circle patterns, both in the tool arrangements and in the subcutaneous markings documented by Dr. Huxley. The possible significance of this specific time remains unknown, though several researchers have noted that 3.17 is approximately the square root of 10, a mathematical relationship that may hold some relevance to the entity's apparent interest in precise measurement and mapping. By June 1895, Harper's Ridge had effectively been abandoned. The Western Coal and Timber Company officially closed the mine on June 7th, citing geological instability as the primary reason. Company financial records indicate an extraordinary expenditure of $13,000, equivalent to approximately $400,000 in today's currency, for site containment and security measures in the weeks following closure. The nature of these security measures becomes clear in correspondence between Harrington Caldwell and the company's main office in Pittsburgh. Have completed the collapse of all main access shafts as directed. Subsidiary tunnels have been sealed with concrete, reinforced with iron beams. The eastern ridge face has been dynamited to conceal the location of emergency exit shafts. Guards have been posted with instructions to prevent any attempts to re-enter the site. I cannot overstate the importance of maintaining these security protocols indefinitely. What lies beneath must remain there. A further letter dated June 22, 1895, expresses Caldwell's continuing concern. The unusual seismic activity persists despite our containment efforts. Guards report hearing the distinctive tapping sounds emanating from multiple points along the ridge, suggesting whatever we've contained is still mobile within the deeper tunnel systems. Most alarming are reports from the southern perimeter, nearly 2 miles from the original mining operation. Something appears to be creating new access points. I've dispatched additional security personnel, but fear our efforts merely delay the inevitable. This entity, I no longer pretend we're dealing with natural geological processes, demonstrates a disturbing intelligence and persistence. An engineering report attached to this correspondence details the extraordinary containment measures implemented. Primary shaft sealed with alternating layers of concrete and steel plate to a depth of 200 feet. Subsidiary shafts and known natural openings treated similarly. Experimental sonic detection equipment installed at 500-foot intervals around 3-mile perimeter to monitor for subsurface movement or tunneling activity. All structures within 1-mile radius of main shaft demolished to eliminate potential shelter for unauthorized visitors. Recommend maintaining armed security patrols indefinitely and immediate response to any detected anomalies. A private communication from the company's chief legal counsel, dated June 30, 1895, reveals the extent of the corporation's concerns. Having reviewed all documentation regarding the Harpers Ridge situation, I strongly recommend complete disavowal of any official knowledge regarding unusual occurrences at the site. All internal correspondence should be destroyed following review of this memorandum. Official explanation for mine closure to emphasize conventional geological instability with no reference to unexplained phenomena or casualties beyond those previously acknowledged in public statements. Financial compensation has been arranged for families of missing workers, contingent upon execution of comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. Medical records related to the unusual symptoms observed in affected miners have been sequestered under attorney-client privilege. Dr. Huxley has been offered a research position with our subsidiary in Colorado, which I strongly encourage him to accept, given his extensive knowledge of sensitive matters. Should reports of similar phenomena emerge at other company operations, immediate containment protocols should be implemented before public awareness develops. Under no circumstances should government authorities beyond local level be informed, as national attention would devastate company valuation and potentially trigger regulatory actions across all operations. A final communication from Caldwell, dated July 3, 1895, was found among Dr. Whitaker's preserved documents. It differs markedly in tone from his previous correspondence, raising questions about his mental state at the time of writing. I hear it now, even in Pittsburgh. The tapping, the scraping. At night, when the city grows quiet, I can make out the pattern. It's searching, following. The symbols appear on my skin when I wake. The same markings found in the deep tunnels. I have not returned to Harper's Ridge, yet somehow I believe it knows where I am. I will be departing for Europe on tomorrow's steamer. Perhaps an ocean will be sufficient barrier. I leave all relevant documentation with company counsel and wash my hands of this cursed enterprise. May God have mercy on those who remain. Immigration records confirm Harrington Caldwell departed for Liverpool on July 4, 1895. No further record of his activities or whereabouts has been discovered, suggesting he may have adopted a new identity upon reaching Europe. However, a curious report in the London Times, dated September 12, 1895, may provide a clue to his fate. Authorities continue to investigate the unusual disappearance of an American businessman from his rooms at the Langham Hotel. The gentleman, whose name has been withheld pending notification of relations, reportedly complained to hotel staff of hearing unusual tapping sounds in the walls for several days prior to his disappearance. His rooms were found vacant with no sign of forced entry or struggle, though hotel engineers report peculiar damage to the stone masonry of the exterior wall, damage described as resembling drill marks or bore holes. though no construction was authorized or undertaken. Dr. Huxley continued to treat survivors from Harper's Ridge throughout the summer of 1895. His final journal entry regarding these patients, dated August 29th, presents a disturbing conclusion. I am now convinced the affliction affecting the Harper's Ridge miners is not merely physical, but represents something heretofore unknown to medical science. The progressive nature of their condition, beginning with memory disturbances and advancing to physical deterioration and personality disintegration, suggests a systematic repurposing of human anatomy and consciousness. More alarming is the consistency of delusions across patients who have had no contact with one another. All describe the old miner who tunnels through flesh as easily as stone and who remembers the ways of men from long before. Having observed the progression in 23 separate cases, I can now identify distinct stages of the condition. Stage 1. Memory lapses specific to time spent in deep mine sections, accompanied by mild personality changes and the appearance of small puncture wounds, typically at the base of the skull or along the spinal column. Stage 2. Development of subcutaneous tunneling visible as raised ridges beneath the skin, forming precise geometric patterns. Affected individuals exhibit emotional detachment and fixation on returning to the mine. Gray pallor becomes pronounced. Stage 3. Progressive tissue transformation, with affected areas becoming desiccated and powdery when breached. Vocalization becomes minimal and mechanical, often limited to repetition of specific phrases related to mining, tunneling, or the old one beneath. Stage 4. Catastrophic internal reorganization, with major organs and tissues being partially converted to the gray powder substance through extensive internal tunneling. Consciousness remains, despite physical deterioration that would typically result in death. Stage 5. Complete dissolution of identity with retention of basic motor function. Body becomes vehicle for expression of external will, often engaging in precise, repetitive behaviors such as creation of circular patterns or rhythmic tapping. Terminal stage typically culminates in total tissue collapse and apparent hollowing of the physical form. The implications of this progression are too terrible to fully contemplate. Whatever entity dwells beneath Harper's Ridge appears capable of systematically harvesting not merely human tissue, but human consciousness itself, preserving and perhaps integrating aspects of its victim's knowledge and experience while discarding the remainder. The precision of this process suggests a purposefulness beyond mere predation, as if the entity is deliberately studying human anatomy and cognition through this methodical deconstruction. A particularly disturbing case documented by Dr. Huxley involved former mine foreman Matthias Reinhardt, who had supervised operations in the northeastern tunnels where the disturbances began. Admitted to Huxley's care on July 17th, Reinhardt initially presented with the now familiar symptoms: memory lapses, emotional detachment, and the characteristic gray pallor. His condition deteriorated rapidly, however, manifesting unusual symptoms not observed in previous cases. From Huxley's notes, dated July 23rd, Reinhardt's transformation accelerates beyond any previous subject. The tunneling beneath his skin has become visible to naked eye observation, with distinct movement discernible particularly across upper back and neck. Patient no longer sleeps, but instead enters prolonged catatonic states during which the subcutaneous activity intensifies. Most disturbing is his newfound ability to precisely mimic voices of hospital staff, repeating conversations verbatim that occurred outside his presence, suggesting some previously unrecognized auditory sensitivity. By July 30th, Huxley reports, Reinhardt no longer speaks except to repeat a single phrase. It learns through what it takes. Physical deterioration has progressed to near-complete muscle atrophy, yet patient demonstrates periodic bursts of extraordinary strength, requiring additional restraints. The tunneling wounds now exude significant quantities of the gray powder substance previously noted in autopsy findings. Laboratory analysis remains inconclusive, though microscopic examination reveals crystalline structures unlike any known mineral or organic compound. A nursing log from this period contains this troubling observation. Patient R continues to manifest impossible knowledge of events occurring beyond his sensory range. Today he recited verbatim a conversation between Dr. Huxley and myself that took place in the basement laboratory, 2 floors below his room and behind closed doors. When questioned about this knowledge, he replied only, "The old miner hears through stone. All stone is connected. All stone remembers." Most disturbing was his precise imitation of not only our words, but our exact vocal patterns and inflections. On August 7th, Huxley made his final entry regarding Reinhardt. Patient expired at 2:13 a.m. Circumstances highly abnormal. Night nurse Winters reported checking Reinhardt's room at midnight, finding him in typical catatonic state. At approximately 2 a.m., staff reported sounds of collapse from patient's room. Upon investigation, Reinhardt was found deceased, his body in advanced state of desiccation, inconsistent with time elapsed since previous examination. Most alarmingly, extensive portions of skeletal structure appear to have been removed, yet skin remains largely intact, creating impression of a partially collapsed husk. No evidence of bone fragments found within room. Door remained locked from outside throughout night, with no signs of entry. Matter referred to county coroner. No coroner's report has been found in existing records. An unofficial addendum in Huxley's private notes, not included in official medical documentation, adds this disturbing observation. Room inspection revealed extensive damage to stone masonry of exterior wall, damage resembling the boreholes previously observed in the mine tunnels. Most concerning is the pattern of this damage, which forms a perfect circle 7 feet in diameter with precisely spaced holes along its circumference. The wall itself remains structurally intact, with no breach large enough to admit a human form, yet something appears to have exited through solid stone, taking significant portions of Reinhardt's internal structure with it. The survivors from Harper's Ridge dispersed throughout the region in the following months, with many leaving West Virginia entirely. Census records and parish registries indicate most changed their names and avoided discussing their experiences at the Ridge. Those who remained in the area reportedly suffered from chronic health issues and died prematurely. Medical records from regional hospitals between 1895 and 1910 show an unusual pattern among former Harper's Ridge residents. Many developed rare bone disorders characterized by progressive demineralization and structural deterioration similar to advanced osteoporosis, but affecting patients of all ages, including individuals in their 20s and 30s. Several cases progressed to complete skeletal collapse despite no identifiable disease process. Autopsies frequently noted the presence of unusual crystalline structures within bone marrow and surrounding tissues, though these findings were typically attributed to mineral deposits from coal mining exposure. One exception was Abigail Whitcomb, widow of miner Howard Whitcomb, who provided testimony to a visiting journalist from the Baltimore Sun in 1897. Though the resulting article was never published, the newspaper's archives contain a note indicating the piece was withdrawn at the request of federal authorities. The journalist's original notes were preserved in private collection. From these notes, Mrs. Whitcomb remains convinced her husband's fate was sealed weeks before his physical disappearance. Howard changed after working the deep eastern tunnels, she explains. Started talking about the original miner, who'd been working those seams long before any company arrived. Said this ancient miner had ways of extracting things more precious than coal from the earth. I thought it was just miner's superstition, until I found the markings on his back, these raised ridges under the skin, arranged in patterns. When I asked about them, he just smiled in this empty way and said they were claim marks. That was 3 days before he walked out and never returned. Most disturbing was Mrs. Whitcomb's account of the community's gradual awareness of what they faced. It wasn't just taking them, she insists. It was studying them, learning from them. The first ones who disappeared, they were just food. But later it got more careful. It would send them back changed, hollowed out, but still walking, still talking in this flat way. And we realized it was using them to understand us better, to learn how we think, how we build, how we live. The company tried to keep it all quiet, of course, but we all knew. That thing beneath the ridge had been there for centuries, maybe longer. Our mining just finally reached deep enough to disturb its territory. And now it's awake, and it's curious, and it's hungry in ways that go beyond mere eating. Mrs. Whitcomb's account continues with a disturbing theory regarding the entity's nature and purpose. Howard told me something just before he changed completely. He said the old miner wasn't just taking parts of people, it was taking knowledge. Each person it processed added to what it knew. The engineers gave it understanding of structure and support systems. The foreman gave it knowledge of human organization and management. The doctors who went down trying to help gave it understanding of human biology. It was building something out of what it took from us, not just physical materials, but understanding. When I asked what it could possibly want with such knowledge, Howard just looked at me with those hollow eyes and said, to complete its work, it's been mining something far older than coal, something buried deep in the mountains long before humans arrived. And now it knows how to refine what it's found. The journalist's notes include this personal observation. Mrs. Whitcomb showed me a peculiar artifact, a small crystalline structure approximately the size of a walnut, with an unusual geometric formation unlike any mineral specimen I've encountered. She claims her husband brought it from the deep tunnels shortly before his transformation began. The crystal appears to emit a faint luminescence in darkness and feels unnaturally warm to the touch. When placed near a compass, it causes the needle to spin erratically, rather than simply deflecting it. Mrs. Whitcomb believes this represents a sample of whatever the entity has been mining beneath the ridge for centuries. Most disturbing is her insistence that the crystal remembers her husband in some capacity, that it occasionally emits sounds that mimic his voice, particularly at 3:17 a.m. each morning. I heard no such phenomenon during my overnight stay, though I must acknowledge the crystal's unusual physical properties defy conventional geological explanation. The land where Harper's Ridge once stood was purchased by the federal government in 1918 as part of a larger conservation initiative. Maps from this period no longer show Harper's Ridge as a named location, and the settlement itself was demolished, with forest reclaiming the area. Today, the exact location of the Harper's Ridge mine has been lost to time, with even local historians uncertain of its precise coordinates. Federal acquisition records contain an unusual stipulation regarding this particular land parcel. No subsurface activities of any kind to be permitted within designated area. No drilling, mining, excavation, or geological sampling to be conducted without explicit presidential approval. Area to remain under permanent conservation status with restricted access protocols. An internal memorandum from the Department of the Interior dated August 1918 provides additional context for this extraordinary restriction. Following extensive consultation with geological and medical experts familiar with the 1895 incidents, this department recommends establishment of a permanent exclusion zone extending 3 miles in all directions from the former mining settlement. Surface access may be permitted under strict supervision, but any disturbance of subsurface geological formations must be absolutely prohibited. Monitoring stations should be established at strategic locations to detect seismic anomalies suggesting continued subsurface activity. These stations should be disguised as standard geological survey markers to avoid public curiosity. Armed patrol units are recommended during initial 5-year observation period, after which security protocols may be adjusted based on recorded activity levels. All documentation regarding the true purpose of this restricted area is to be classified at highest security level, with access limited to designated officials with explicit presidential authorization. Public narrative to emphasize conventional conservation objectives with no reference to historical events or subsurface anomalies. In 1952, an expedition led by geology professor Lawrence Pritchard from West Virginia University sought to locate the sealed mine entrances as part of a study on historical mining techniques in the region. According to university records, Pritchard and his 3 graduate students disappeared during their expedition. A search party found their camp abandoned with equipment still in place. The only clue to their fate was a notebook containing Pritchard's final entry: "Have discovered what appears to be a collapsed mine shaft approximately 2 miles north of our expected location. The surrounding stone exhibits unusual erosion patterns and curious markings inconsistent with standard mining practices of the period. We will attempt to clear enough debris for a preliminary examination tomorrow." A supplementary report from the search team leader, dated October 14, 1952, mentions additional findings. Search of immediate vicinity revealed unusual circular depressions approximately 7 feet in diameter surrounding the abandoned campsite. Each depression contained research equipment arranged in concentric patterns. No signs of struggle or forced departure. Most disturbing was the discovery of a small recorder containing what appears to be the final moments at camp. Recording quality is poor, but includes distinct rhythmic tapping sounds, followed by Professor Pritchard's voice stating, "It's responding to our geological equipment. The vibrations seem to attract it." Faint scraping sounds follow, then silence. Have turned recording over to state police as evidence. The recording itself has never been made public, though a transcript purportedly created by state police audio specialists contains this chilling exchange. Rhythmic tapping sounds, pattern of 3 rapid taps followed by 2 slow taps, repeated. "Pritchard, it's responding to our geological equipment. The vibrations seem to attract it." Student 1, identified as Martin Kellerman. "There it is again." Coming from directly beneath us, Pritchard. Everyone remain still. "Reynolds, are you getting this on tape?" Reynolds. "Yes, sir. Levels are good." Tapping pattern intensifies. Now includes complex rhythmic variations. Kellerman. "Professor, look at the seismograph." Pritchard. "Impossible. These readings suggest something moving through solid bedrock at walking speed." Sound of equipment falling. The unidentified student. "The ground is moving." Pritchard. "Nobody panic. Whatever it is, it's still at least 30 feet below us according to these readings." Sound of stone grinding against stone. Reynolds. "Professor, the survey stakes." Pritchard. "What the hell?" They're arranging themselves. Nobody touch them." Tapping stops suddenly. Kellerman. "Do you hear that?" It sounds like... Recording ends abruptly. The federal response to the Pritchard expedition's disappearance was swift and disproportionate for what was officially classified as a routine missing persons case. Within 48 hours, federal agents had secured the search area and removed all evidence, including the recording, from local police custody. The university was instructed to list the expedition members as missing during routine field exercise, with no reference to their specific location or research objectives. From Dr. E. Samuel Whitaker's notes on the Harper's Ridge documents, 1963. The most disturbing aspect of these accounts is not what they explicitly state, but rather what they collectively imply, that something ancient and utterly inhuman had been disturbed by the mining operation, something that had been conducting its own form of mining long before humans arrived. The consistent references across multiple independent sources to tunneling, both through earth and human tissue, suggest an entity that processes and utilizes organic material in the same manner it processes inorganic matter, with no apparent distinction between the two. The progressive sophistication of its interactions with human victims is particularly troubling. Early accounts describe simple disappearances, miners vanishing without trace. Later incidents involve the return of altered individuals, suggesting the entity had developed an interest in studying its prey rather than merely consuming them. By the final stages of the Harper's Ridge incident, we see evidence of active mimicry and information gathering. The entity appears to have been learning, adapting, and applying harvested knowledge to improve its understanding of human behavior and biology. Whitaker's final observation. Perhaps most terrifying is the possibility that the entity was not merely predatory but inquisitive, learning, adapting, and ultimately attempting to understand its new prey. The careful arrangement of tools, the ritualistic patterns, the progressive sophistication of its interaction with human victims, these suggest an intelligence working toward some purpose beyond simple consumption. The question remains, did the security measures implemented in 1895 actually contain this entity or merely delay its eventual emergence? In a private letter to a colleague at Miskatonic University, dated September 30th, 1963, Whitaker expressed more personal concerns. What haunts me most about the Harper's Ridge case is not just the historical horror, but its potential continuity into our present. The geographic distribution of similar cases I've quietly documented forms a pattern expanding outward from the original site. Cases separated by both distance and time, yet sharing key characteristics. The subcutaneous tunneling, the gray pallor, the personality dissolution, and most specifically, the recurring symbols found both carved into stone and manifesting beneath human skin. The entity's method appears consistent across decades. It does not merely kill, it processes. It extracts not just tissue, but knowledge, experience, memory. If my theory is correct, it has been gradually expanding its territory for over 60 years, moving with such patience and subtlety that its progress remains largely undetected. What we observed at Harper's Ridge may have been merely its first encounter with human prey, its initial experimental phase. What might it have learned in the intervening decades? How might it have refined its techniques? And perhaps most chilling, what might be its ultimate purpose? The letter continues with a disturbing personal revelation. I must confess my interest in this case transcends academic curiosity. My maternal grandfather, Jonathan Mercer, was among those who fled Harper's Ridge in 1895. He never spoke of his experiences there, but after his death in 1947, I discovered journals hidden within his personal effects, journals documenting the progressive transformation of his brother Isaiah, one of the earliest victims. These accounts align precisely with the medical documentation I've since uncovered, describing the same stages of physical and psychological deterioration. But they also contain elements absent from official records, specifically references to what my grandfather called the remembering stone that Isaiah brought from the deep tunnels shortly before his transformation began. He described this object as a crystalline structure that seemed to remember voices and sounds, occasionally reproducing them with perfect fidelity. Most disturbing is his assertion that this remembering stone continued to acquire new information even after being removed from the mine, that it somehow remained connected to the entity beneath the ridge and served as a conduit for its consciousness. My grandfather eventually buried the stone beneath the foundation of his home, encased in lead and surrounded by protective symbols he believed would contain its influence. Whether these precautions reflected genuine efficacy or merely superstitious comfort, I cannot say. The Harper's Ridge documents disappeared while being transported to state archives in 1963. The transport vehicle was found abandoned along Route 16, approximately 15 miles east of the former settlement location. The driver, James Colson, was never located. A state police report dated November 17, 1963, contains this brief notation: vehicle intact, keys present, no signs of collision or struggle. Driver's personal effects remain in vehicle, including wallet with cash. Of transported materials, only empty container located. Ground surrounding vehicle shows unusual depressions approximately 7 feet in diameter. Witness reports from nearby residents describe hearing tapping sounds shortly before midnight, though source could not be identified. Investigation ongoing. No further reports on the investigation have been found. An interview conducted with Maria Hadley, resident of a farmhouse approximately half a mile from where the transport vehicle was discovered, provides additional context not included in official documentation. I was up late that night, couldn't sleep on account of this tapping sound coming from somewhere outside. Sounded like someone was hitting a piece of metal against stone, real rhythmic-like. At first I thought it might be water pipes, but we're on a well system out here. Around midnight, I looked out my bedroom window and saw lights on the highway. Not car headlights, but something smaller, moving in a circle. Figured maybe kids playing some prank. But then I heard a scream, just one, cut off real sudden. By the time I got my husband up, and we went to look, there wasn't nothing there except that empty truck sitting on the roadside. And those perfect circles pressed into the ground all around it, like something heavy had been set down in the same pattern over and over. Strangest thing was what my husband found when he walked the property line next morning. One of our boundary stones, this big limestone marker that's been there since my granddaddy's time, it had these weird drill marks all over it, perfect little holes about the size of a pencil, arranged in patterns. And the stone itself had shifted somehow, turned about 45 degrees from how it always sat, like something had picked it up and set it back down, different. In 1968, a U.S. Geological Survey team conducting a routine examination of the region reported unusual seismic activity beneath the ridge where the Harpers Ridge mine once operated. Their report notes, intermittent microtremors suggest ongoing subsurface movement inconsistent with known geological processes in the region. Recommend comprehensive survey of area. No follow-up study was ever conducted. The technical appendix to this report contains more specific observations. Seismic anomalies detected at depths between 1,800 and 2,300 feet indicate systematic movement through solid bedrock strata at velocities inconsistent with known geological processes. Movement patterns suggest deliberate navigation rather than random settling or fault activity. Most concerning is the progressive expansion of the affected area, approximately 17% larger than similar readings taken during classified surveys conducted in 1952. Of particular note are the regular patterns of microseismic activity occurring daily at precisely 3:17 a.m. local time. These patterns persist for exactly 7 minutes and consist of rhythmic vibrations resembling artificial drilling operations rather than natural tectonic activity. The vibrations form distinct patterns that, when mapped across three-dimensional space, create geometric configurations similar to those documented in classified historical records related to this region. Subsequent geological surveys of Raleigh County conspicuously omit the specific area surrounding the former mining settlement. Freedom of Information Act requests regarding subsurface anomalies in the region have been consistently denied, citing national security concerns, an unusual justification for what should be routine geological data. Local residents still avoid the densely forested area where Harpers Ridge once stood. Hunters and hikers occasionally report hearing rhythmic tapping sounds emanating from the ground, particularly during the winter months when the ridge falls silent under snow. Park rangers dismiss these accounts as the natural sounds of settling earth or wildlife activity. A park ranger who served in the region between 1965 and 1971, speaking on condition of anonymity in 1989, offered a different perspective. We had standing orders to discourage anyone from camping or conducting any kind of excavation in that section of forest. If hikers reported hearing unusual sounds or seeing circular depressions in the ground, we were instructed to attribute these to natural phenomena and escort them from the area immediately. Every month, specialists from some federal agency, they never identified themselves beyond showing credentials, would arrive to check monitoring equipment disguised as ordinary survey markers throughout the region. They paid particular attention to a series of concrete foundations scattered across the area, massive slabs with no apparent purpose, though locals called them Whitaker's Caps, after the historian who supposedly commissioned their construction in the 1960s. The specialists never explained what they were monitoring, but their equipment became increasingly sophisticated over the years I worked there. In 1970, they installed new devices in all the survey markers that they handled with extreme caution, wearing protective gear that seemed excessive for ordinary geological instruments. When I asked one technician about the precautions, he just said they were measuring subsurface communication patterns and refused to elaborate further. Perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence regarding the Harper's Ridge incident comes from an anonymous letter sent to the Beckley Mountain Herald in 1967, purportedly from a descendant of one of the survivors. My grandfather spoke of it only once on his deathbed in 1943. He said the old miner beneath the ridge hadn't always been there, that it came from somewhere deeper, somewhere older than the mountains themselves. He said it learned from watching the miners work, learned how to make tunnels, how to use tools, how to harvest what it needed. But what it needed wasn't coal. Grandfather said it started with small things, taking bits of flesh, blood, bone. But then it wanted more. It wanted memories, experiences, knowledge. It hollowed out the miners from the inside, not just their bodies, but their minds, preserving what it found useful and discarding the rest. And it's still down there, still learning, still tunneling its way upward, inch by inch, year by year. He made me promise never to go near the ridge, never to dig into the earth anywhere in Raleigh County. It remembers everyone who was there, he told me. It knows their blood, and the blood of their children, and their children's children. And someday, when it's learned enough, when it's ready, it will come looking for what remains. The letter continues with a disturbing personal account. I thought it was just the ramblings of a dying man until last month, when I began finding the marks on my own skin, raised ridges forming patterns I'd never seen before. My doctor claims they're just unusual scar tissue, but they appear overnight, without pain or previous injury. And sometimes in the quiet pre-dawn hours, I hear tapping from beneath my floorboards, a rhythm, a pattern, almost like a language, as if something is trying to communicate, or perhaps to claim. I've never been to Harper's Ridge. I've never even been to West Virginia until moving to Beckley for work last year. Yet somehow, this thing knows me, knows my connection to someone who escaped it decades ago. The patterns beneath my skin match exactly the drawings in my grandfather's journal, drawings he made of the marks that appeared on his brother's body before he disappeared into the mine in 1895. Last night at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke to find a perfect circle of small holes in my bedroom floor, holes that penetrate the hardwood, the subflooring, and extend it into the stone foundation beneath. At the center of this circle was a small crystalline object, warm to the touch and faintly luminous. When I held it, I heard my grandfather's voice, not as I remember it, but as it must have sounded in 1895, young and strong. It said only 7 words, "It's coming for what remains of us." County records indicate the letter's author, though anonymous in the published version, was identified as Richard Mercer, great-nephew of Isaiah, and Jacob Mercer, mentioned in the original 1895 accounts. Mercer disappeared from his Beckley residence approximately 2 weeks after the letter was published. Police reports describe finding his home undisturbed, except for a perfect circle of small holes in his bedroom floor and unusual damage to the stone foundation beneath the house. The Western Coal and Timber Company ceased operations entirely in 1899, declaring bankruptcy, despite having been one of the region's most profitable enterprises just 5 years earlier. Financial records indicate the company spent enormous sums on site remediation at multiple locations throughout West Virginia, though Harper's Ridge received the most extensive and expensive containment measures. Company correspondence from this period reveals increasingly desperate communications between the Pittsburgh headquarters and remaining operations throughout the region. One letter from acting President Malcolm Whitfield to shareholders, dated March 1898, attempts to explain the company's rapid decline. Unforeseen geological complications at multiple extraction sites have necessitated extensive and costly remediation efforts. These extraordinary expenses, while regrettable, are absolutely essential to maintain safe operating conditions and fulfill our obligations to affected communities. We remain committed to responsible business practices despite their impact on short-term profitability. A more candid internal memo from Whitfield to the Board of Directors provides additional context. The Harpers Ridge situation was merely the first manifestation of a much broader problem. We now have documented similar phenomena at 3 additional mining operations, though thankfully in earlier stages of development. The containment protocols developed at Harpers Ridge have proven effective when implemented promptly, though at considerable expense. I need not remind the Board that the alternative, allowing these situations to develop as fully as at Harpers Ridge, would prove catastrophic not only to company finances, but to public safety throughout the region. The memo continues with a disturbing projection. Dr. Sullivan's analysis suggests the phenomenon is spreading outward from the original site at a measurable rate, approximately 0.7 miles per year. At this progression, major population centers, including Charleston, will be within the affected radius within 50 years. The containment measures we've implemented appear to slow but not stop this expansion. Whether we're dealing with a physical entity capable of subsurface movement or some form of contagion transmitted through geological strata remains unclear, but the consistent manifestation of symptoms across all affected sites suggests a common origin. Most troubling is Dr. Sullivan's observation regarding the progressive sophistication of the phenomenon's interaction with human subjects. The initial cases at Harpers Ridge reflected relatively crude harvesting of biological material and basic mimicry of human behaviors. More recent cases from our Colwood and Marion County operations demonstrate more selective extraction of neural tissue and complex replication of personality characteristics. The phenomenon appears to be refining its techniques based on accumulated experience. In essence, it is learning. To this day, certain government geological surveys of Raleigh County remain classified. Requests for information regarding subsurface anomalies in the region are routinely denied. Local conservation officers maintain an unmarked perimeter around the former settlement site, ostensibly as part of a wildlife protection initiative. A former Forest Service employee, speaking on condition of anonymity in 1962, provided a different perspective. The restricted zone isn't about wildlife. There's nothing living in those woods that needs special protection. It's about keeping people out, keeping them from digging or drilling or doing anything that might disturb what's underneath. We were told never to allow any kind of excavation equipment into the area, never to approve camping permits for that section of forest. And we all knew why, even if nobody said it officially. Something's down there, something that shouldn't be disturbed. Every few years, usually after heavy rains or minor earth tremors, we'd find them. These perfect circles on the forest floor about 7 feet across with the ground depressed, like something had pushed up from below, then settled back. And always with things arranged in the middle. Fallen branches, stones, sometimes equipment left by hikers who ignored the restrictions. Always arranged in these concentric patterns, like something was studying them, learning about them. We were instructed to photograph these formations, then destroy them immediately. No record of these photographs exists in public archives. The worst was finding the animals. Always at the centers of these circles, always arranged the same way, laid out with surgical precision, partially hollowed from the inside, with no external wounds, except these tiny holes at the base of the skull or along the spine. And that gray powder inside what remained, like something had replaced their internal organs with dust. The rangers who found these were instructed never to document them in official reports, to simply bury the remains deep and mark the locations for the federal technicians who would come through later with their equipment. In 22 years of service, I only once saw something that truly terrified me. It was 1959, after a minor earthquake had rattled the region. I was checking the perimeter markers when I found a fresh circle, much larger than any I'd seen before, nearly 20 feet across. At its center wasn't an animal or arranged objects, but a perfect scale model of the monitoring station we'd established 3 miles away, every detail perfect, from the equipment configurations to the security fencing, all constructed from tiny pieces of stone, fitted together with that gray powder substance as mortar. It wasn't just mimicking anymore, it was demonstrating comprehension, understanding. That's when I requested transfer to another district. Some things you don't want to know about, let alone understand. The truth about what happened at Harper's Ridge in the winter of 1895 may never be fully known. The documents discovered in 1963 provided only fragmentary insights into events deliberately obscured by those who survived them. What remains clear is that something was disturbed beneath that remote Appalachian ridge, something that, in the words of Augustus Ward, moves through stone as a man moves through air, and has been mining something far more valuable than coal. As this account draws to a close, one final piece of evidence bears mentioning. In 1968, shortly before his death, Dr. Samuel Whitaker amended his original notes on the Harper's Ridge documents with a brief addendum. I have reason to believe the entity beneath Harper's Ridge was not contained, but merely delayed. The pattern of unexplained disappearances in the surrounding counties follows a clear progression outward from the original site, as if something is systematically expanding its territory beneath the earth. More concerning are the medical reports I've quietly collected from regional physicians, cases of patients exhibiting symptoms disturbingly similar to those described by Dr. Huxley in 1895, memory disturbances, emotional detachment, and in advanced cases, unexplained subcutaneous tunneling wounds. These cases remain isolated and widely separated, perhaps deliberately so, to avoid drawing attention to a pattern. Most recently, I've documented 7 separate instances within a 50-mile radius of the original site where circular depressions matching the description from 1895 have appeared on private property. In each case, objects were found arranged in concentric patterns at the center of these depressions. In each case, the property owner reported hearing rhythmic tapping sounds emanating from beneath their land in the days preceding the formation's appearance. I leave these observations as my final professional contribution, though I pray they are merely the paranoid speculations of an old man rather than the recognition of a horror still unfolding beneath our feet. For if what dwells beneath Harper's Ridge continues its patient, methodical expansion, tunneling through earth and flesh with equal purpose, then the horror of 1895 was merely prelude. Dr. Whitaker was found deceased in his home on November 3, 1968. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, though colleagues noted he had no prior history of cardiac issues. A colleague who identified the body reported unusual markings visible on Whitaker's neck and forearms, raised ridges, forming distinct patterns beneath the skin. These observations were not included in the official medical report. A final disturbing detail emerges from county property records. In the weeks before his death, Dr. Whitaker had begun purchasing rural land parcels throughout Raleigh County. Each purchase was immediately followed by the pouring of massive concrete foundations, structures, without buildings, simply vast slabs of reinforced concrete ranging from 1 to 3 feet thick. When questioned by neighbors, Whitaker reportedly explained he was creating barriers, but declined to elaborate further. These concrete slabs remain in place today, weathered by decades of exposure, but still intact. Locals refer to them as Whitaker's caps and generally avoid them, though few remember their original purpose. Geological surveys conducted near several of these locations in the early 1990s revealed unusual density anomalies beneath the concrete, sections of earth that appear to be hollowed out in distinct patterns that extend far deeper than any natural cave formation should reach. In 1997, during highway expansion work approximately 27 miles east of the former Harper's Ridge location, construction crews uncovered an unusual geological formation beneath a limestone outcropping. According to the initial geological assessment, this formation consisted of perfectly cylindrical tunnels approximately 7 inches in diameter, extending horizontally through solid bedrock in intricate, interconnected patterns. Before detailed examination could be conducted, federal authorities assumed jurisdiction over the site, halting construction and implementing extensive security measures. The formation was reburied beneath tons of concrete, and all workers present during the discovery were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. The highway was subsequently rerouted around the site, which remains restricted to this day. Local folklore continues to warn children against digging too deeply into the earth. Throughout Raleigh County, parents still quiet misbehaving children with a peculiar caution. Don't dig holes or tap on stones, or the old miner will hear you and come tunneling up from below. This warning, seemingly a simple superstition, persists more than a century after the events at Harper's Ridge. The forest has reclaimed what once was Harper's Ridge. The mining operation, the settlement, the lives disrupted and destroyed, all have faded into historical footnotes, deliberately obscured by those who understood the importance of forgetting. But beneath the silent trees, beneath the layers of soil and stone, something remains, something that learned to tunnel through more than just earth, something that waits and listens and remembers. And if you find yourself in the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia and happen to hear a rhythmic tapping from beneath the ground, a sound like stone being methodically scraped against stone, remember the fate of those who answered such sounds at Harper's Ridge in the winter of 1895. Some depths are best left unexplored. Some miners should never be disturbed. For the entity beneath the ridge still tunnels through the darkness, still extracts what it finds valuable, still processes what it harvests. And with each passing year, with each new victim, it learns, it adapts, it expands, moving through stone as a man moves through air, refining what it has mined from human bodies and human minds for more than a century, working towards some purpose we can only begin to comprehend. Perhaps it seeks merely to survive, to consume, to expand its territory, or perhaps, as some of the fragmentary accounts suggest, it works towards something more profound, studying us, learning from us, adapting our knowledge and abilities to serve its ancient purpose. Whatever that purpose may be, one thing remains certain. What the miner beneath the ridge did to the lost was indeed worse than we could possibly imagine. Not because of the physical horror, terrible though that was, but because of what it represented, the methodical harvesting of human essence by something utterly alien, something that sees us not as adversaries or even prey, but as resources to be processed, knowledge to be extracted, patterns to be studied and replicated. It tunnels still, patiently expanding its domain, 1/7 of an inch by 1/7 of an inch, year after year. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, if you press your ear to the ground in certain remote corners of West Virginia, you might hear it, a rhythmic tapping, a pattern of communication as old as the mountains themselves. The voice of the original miner speaking through stone, reaching out to claim what it believes already belongs to it. Listen closely, and you might hear your own name in that tapping. For the old miner remembers everyone it has encountered, directly or indirectly. It remembers, and it waits, and it tunnels ever upward, always learning, always adapting, always mining for something far more valuable than coal.